In 1988, European football was completely dominated by the Netherlands. Their influence was felt across the continent as Dutch clubs, players and managers all thrived. PSV Eindhoven won the European Cup under Guus Hiddink to complete an iconic treble led by their star player Ronald Koeman. And they achieved this despite selling Ruud Gullit to AC Milan, who was also joined by Marco van Basten. Together in '88, they won Milan's first Scudetto for 9 years, kickstarting the Rossoneri's golden era. This coming just a year after Van Basten, alongside Frank Rijkaard, won the Cup Winners' Cup under Johan Cruyff's Ajax. And a year later, despite Cruyff and those two star players leaving, Ajax once again reached the final. This time they lost 1-0 to Mechelen from Belgium. Yet the winning goal was scored by Piet Damboa, one of 4 Dutch players in the team, which also included Erwin Koeman. The Belgian side were even coached by a Dutchman in Ard de Mos. The Netherlands was dominating European football. However, they had an era like this in the early 70s where they failed to get over the line on the international stage. A fate that this generation were desperate not to repeat. Yet, despite this dominance at club level, the national side had experienced a decade of disappointment, failing to qualify for 3 out of the last 4 tournaments since reaching the 1978 World Cup final. Therefore, after failing to qualify for the 1986 World Cup, the Netherlands rehired their legendary manager, Rinus Michels, the man who built Ajax into European giants, who won Barcelona their first La Liga title in 14 years, who had taken the Dutch to the 1974 World Cup final, and the man who is credited as the godfather of total football. But surely, Michels returning and winning the Netherlands their first international trophy with their second golden generation after failing to win in 1974 with their first was too perfect of a story. It couldn't happen, could it? The Netherlands opened Euro '88 with a tough test against the Soviet Union, a team that had a distinct advantage over other national sides. You see, their manager Valery Lobanovsky was also the manager of Dynamo Kiev, and the team had 7 regular starters from the Ukrainian side, not to mention others as rotation options. So this was essentially a club side, and a very good one at that. They competed in the super competitive Soviet top league, which they had won in 1986 alongside the UEFA Cup Winners' Cup. That same year, the USSR had impressed at the World Cup, and Igor Belanov was awarded the Ballon d'Or. Tactically, they were also this Dutch team's worst nightmare, as they loved to soak up pressure and thrived on the counter-attack. And to add to the worries of Dutch fans, Rinus Michels made the controversial decision not to start Marco van Basten, who had just recovered from injury, opting instead for John Bosman, who had been their top scorer in qualifying. The game was a frustrating one for the Dutch, who dominated but failed to take their chances. Then, early in the second half, Igor Belanov latched onto a long ball and assisted Vasil Rats, who scored with a great finish. Van Basten came off the bench and the Netherlands threw everything they had at their opponents. However, the Soviets clung on to record a fantastic 1-0 victory. Michels didn't make the same mistake against England, starting Van Basten in their second group match. However, it was the 3 Lions who had the better chances early on, hitting the post twice as Lineker missed a sitter and Hoddle came close from a free kick. But the Dutch made their quality tell when Ruud Gullit played the ball into Van Basten, who hit a Cruyff-esque turn and scored to make it 1-0. Early in the second half, England hit back with a lovely goal from Brian Robson. However, this game was all about Van Basten, who scored 2 more goals to secure a brilliant hat-trick and a crucial 3-1 victory for his nation. The final group game came against a brilliant Ireland team who had already beaten England and drawn to the Soviets. The Irish only needed a point to qualify ahead of the Dutch, which made this a must-win match for the Netherlands. The boys in green defended brilliantly, and even came closest to scoring when Paul McGrath's header hit the post before it was stopped on the line. When the referee blew for half-time with the scores still level, Rinus Michels knew he had to change something. And in the second half, he brought on both Wim Kieft and John Bosman, 2 extra strikers, to break this Irish defence. Then, with just minutes remaining, came one of the strangest moments in Euros history. A mishit shot from Ronald Koeman was headed by Kieft and spun into the net. The Irish felt the goal was offside, something that still isn't 100% clear today. However, it was given and ended up being the goal that sent the Dutch into the semi-finals, where they would face a familiar foe. The Netherlands hadn't beaten West Germany for 32 years, a fact that made Dutch fans worry for their semi-final clash. And this was a brilliant Germany side who had been in the previous 2 World Cup finals and went on to win the World Cup 2 years later. And to make matters worse, the Germans were hosting the tournament, just as they did in the 1974 World Cup, where the Dutch golden generation, led by Cruyff and managed by Rinus Michels, lost to West Germany. Michels once again came up against Franz Beckenbauer, who lifted the World Cup as captain on that day. However, this time he was across the dugout as manager of Die Mannschaft. But the parallels with 1974 didn't end there. It was a fairly entertaining end-to-end game, but neither side could take the lead as the first half ended 0-0. The drama came in the second half, and much like that 74 final, all the talk surrounded 2 penalty incidents. Jürgen Klinsmann ran into Rijkaard before throwing himself to the ground. The German forward had grown a reputation for diving, and the Dutch felt that was the case here. But the ref disagreed and gave the penalty, which Lothar Matthäus just squeezed past the keeper. Beckenbauer later admitted that Klinsmann had in fact dived, but argued that the Dutch penalty was also unjustified, because he believed Jurgen Koller had made a fair tackle on Van Basten. Once again, the referee disagreed and awarded a penalty to the Dutch, which Ronald Koeman coolly slotted home. This penalty galvanised the Netherlands, who were hungry for a victory over their rivals. Meanwhile, Germany tried to manage the game and see it into extra time. And as the match entered its final minutes, it looked like things would be heading that way. However, with just moments remaining, the German defence made the mistake of giving Van Basten an inch, and he creeped the ball into the net. It was delight for the Dutch, who had avenged the loss of 1974 against their rivals in their own backyard, reaching their first final after a decade of disappointments. As the Netherlands walked out for the final of Euro '88, they came face to face with those same Soviet Union players who had beaten them in their opening match. Dutch fans descended on Munich expectant of a victory, but Rinus Michels called for calm heads, reminding players and fans alike what had happened in their opening game. However, this time Michels started Van Basten in a match that would become the pinnacle of the great striker's career. In contrast to that tournament opener, it was actually the USSR who started the game better, creating chances and dominating possession. But the Netherlands were clinical when they got their opportunity in the 32nd minute, as a cross from Erwin Koeman was headed by Van Basten into the path of Ruud Gullit, who scored to make it 1-0. Just minutes later, Igor Belanov missed a great chance to equalise as the first half ended with the score at 1-0. And then, 9 minutes into the second half, came arguably the greatest moment in Euros history. Arnold Muren made what was quite frankly a poor cross, which fell to Van Basten in an unfavourable position. The Milan striker said that usually he would take the ball down with a touch and attempt to find a teammate. But he was feeling tired and in a split second decided to simply hit it. An unbelievable volley from an outrageous angle. Van Basten had just scored the greatest goal in Euros history. However, despite being 2-0 down, the Soviets did not give up. Igor Belanov came close, hitting the post, and then Dutch keeper Hans van Breukelen made a rash error, gifting the USSR a route back into the game with a penalty. Igor Belanov stepped up and smashed the ball into the corner, but the Dutch keeper made amends for his error by making a brilliant save. Belanov could have had a hat-trick on that day, but the Soviets were left to rue what could have been. And as the referee blew the final whistle, the Dutch players and fans went into pandemonium. It was the career high for Rinus Michels, one of the greatest and most influential managers of all time, and he watched on as captain Ruud Gullit went up to lift the trophy. Upon returning home to the Netherlands, the players paraded the trophy through the canals of Amsterdam. The nation celebrated as total football had finally brought an international trophy to its homeland. This was just the beginning of the second Dutch golden generation, and they finished 1988 by doing something truly unique. The top 3 of that year's Ballon d'Or were all from the same country and the same club, a feat that has never been replicated. Marco van Basten was awarded the prestigious Golden Ball, with Ruud Gullit finishing 2nd and Frank Rijkaard 3rd. Ronald Koeman even finished 5th, meaning 4 of the top 5 all came from the Netherlands. AC Milan's Dutch trio won the next 2 European Cups for the Rossoneri, as Gullit and Van Basten scored twice in the '89 final and Rijkaard the winner in the 1990 final. Johan Cruyff became Barcelona manager in the summer of '88 and brought Ronald Koeman with him. He transformed Barca from a club that had won just 2 La Liga titles in 28 years to one which won 4 in a row during the early 90s, not to mention a Cup Winners' Cup and the 1992 European Cup. Dennis Bergkamp won the UEFA Cup with Ajax in 1992, then with Inter in 1994, before moving to Arsenal and leading the charge in changing the face of English football. And across this period, the Dutch national team were always a contender, but got knocked out of the 3 following tournaments by the eventual champions before finishing 4th at the 1998 World Cup. Frank Rijkaard even returned to Ajax and helped them do something truly amazing in 1995. The Dutch Giants secured an iconic double as Patrick Kluivert scored to beat AC Milan 1-0 in the Champions League final. However, this wasn't the most incredible part, because Louis van Gaal led his team to go undefeated in both the Eredivisie and the Champions League. This Ajax team was stacked with young talent, and, guided by Rijkaard's leadership, they were the disciples of 1988, leading Dutch football into a new era. 1988 to 98 was a true golden generation for the Netherlands. However, nothing would ever top the summer of '88 for the Flying Dutchman.